Before auto-tune, before viral fame, before music was compressed into pixels and streams, there were voices. Raw, soul-shaking voices that filled smoky nightclubs, echoed through cathedral-like concert halls, and melted into the grooves of vinyl records. These weren't just performers, they were architects of sound, crafting the very foundation of modern music with nothing but breath, heartbreak, and brilliance. This isn't a list of actors who could carry a tune. This is a tribute to the pure singers of old Hollywood. Those rare few whose voices didn't just entertain, they transcended. Stay with us. By the end, you'll understand why these 12 voices still haunt the silence, decades later. Nat King Cole, elegance made audible. There is a kind of grace that doesn't announce itself. It moves without hurry, speaks without force, and lingers long after the sound is gone. Nat King Cole sang with that kind of grace. His voice didn't rise to meet you, it invited you in. Born Nathaniel Adams Coles in Montgomery, Alabama, and raised in Chicago, Cole first came to prominence as a jazz pianist. By the time the world realized he could sing, he already had the instincts of a musician who understood space, silence, and phrasing not as afterthoughts, but as architecture. His voice rested within the music like a cornerstone, smooth, warm, utterly dependable. His delivery was never urgent. It was precise, patient, and unshakably calm. In an age of brassy big bands and soaring showmanship, Cole's restraint felt almost radical. Songs like Mona Lisa and Unforgettable didn't ask for attention. They earned it with understatement, with subtle dynamics, with a kind of effortless charm that couldn't be taught or faked. He made it sound easy. It never was. Cole was also a quiet revolutionary. As the first black entertainer to host a national television show in America, he faced an industry that welcomed his voice but resisted his presence. Still, he stood at the piano, immaculate in a dark suit, and let the music speak for itself. His songs didn't carry protest, but they carried dignity, and in those years, that was protest enough. There's a reason his records still sound modern. His style never chased trends. It transcended them. He built his sound the way an architect builds a cathedral, with clean lines, deliberate proportions, and timeless materials. Nat King Cole didn't just sing songs. He carved them into stone. Peggy Lee whispered heat. Peggy Lee didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Where others belted, she murmured. Where others demanded attention, she suggested it, and somehow that suggestion carried more weight than 100 shouted choruses. With Peggy, the power was always in the restraint. Born Norma Dolores Eggstrom in North Dakota, Lee grew up with little, but she carried herself like someone who knew the rules of elegance long before she could afford it. Her early career with the Benny Goodman Orchestra gave her exposure, but it was her solo work that revealed who she really was, not just a singer, but a mood. Fever, her most iconic recording, tells you everything you need to know. Sparse instrumentation, finger snaps, that smoky, unbothered vocal. She made every note feel like a secret you were lucky enough to overhear. Her delivery was breathy but never weak, flirtatious but never desperate. It wasn't coyness, it was control. Peggy Lee was, in many ways, the original minimalist in a maximalist era. She didn't overpower a song, she undressed it. She stripped it to its essence and made you lean closer. And she wasn't just a performer. She was a writer, a producer, a creative force behind much of her work at a time when women in the industry were expected to simply show up and sing what they were given. She didn't just show up. She took over. But it wasn't about volume, and it wasn't about flash. It was about feel. And no one felt like Peggy Lee, the cool warmth, the velvet fire, the precise crackle of energy held just below the surface. She proved that sometimes the most unforgettable voices are the ones that don't need to be loud. Just true. Frank Sinatra, the voice that bent the world. When Frank Sinatra sang, the room listened differently. The noise softened, the air shifted, and even the silence seemed to lean in. There was something in the way his voice entered space, not as a performance, but as a presence. He didn't just deliver songs. He seemed to inhabit them, pulling you into a world crafted note by note, syllable by syllable. Born in Hoboken, New Jersey, Sinatra rose from working-class obscurity to become one of the most influential vocalists of the 20th century. His early years were spent chasing a sound he believed in, not just beautiful, but honest. That pursuit led him through the swing era, where he started as a boyish crooner behind big bands. But he wasn't content to stay behind the music. Slowly, methodically, he moved out front, reshaping not just the music industry, but the idea of what a singer could be. What set Sinatra apart was not vocal gymnastics or dramatic flourishes. It was control. He could stretch a phrase to the edge of silence, then reel it back with breathless precision. He understood rhythm not just as tempo, but as storytelling. A pause in his phrasing could carry more weight than another singer's entire verse. Behind that control was vulnerability, always measured, never cheap. His voice invited you in, made you feel known, whether in the aching loneliness of In the Wee Small Hours or the cosmopolitan confidence of Come Fly With Me. Sinatra was more than a star. He was a stylist, an interpreter, and above all, a believer in the emotional weight of a single, well-sung line. He didn't just set the gold standard. He was the gold standard. And the ones who followed would chase the shadow he left behind. Ella Fitzgerald, precision in bloom. Ella Fitzgerald didn't ask for your attention. She earned it with a kind of effortless precision that felt less like performance and more like discovery. The first time you hear her, there's a moment, subtle but undeniable, when you realize she's not just singing a melody. She's rewriting how the melody feels. Born in Newport News, Virginia, and raised in Yonkers, Ella's path to greatness wasn't paved with promises. She entered the spotlight not with polish, but with hunger, winning an amateur contest at the Apollo Theater as a teenager, almost by accident. She'd originally planned to dance. Instead, she sang. And from that moment on, music had no choice but to make room for her. Fitzgerald's voice was a paradox, light as air, but grounded in absolute control. Every note was crystal clear, every phrase delivered with the timing of a master. But her true genius lay in her adaptability. She could take a song you thought you knew and turn it inside out with subtle shifts in phrasing, tone, or swing. Her interpretations of the Great American Songbook didn't just honor the material, they elevated it. Then there was her scat singing, not a gimmick, not a trick, but an art form she helped refine into something close to transcendence. She didn't mimic instruments, she became them, blurring the line between voice and jazz itself. In an era when singers often leaned on drama or spectacle, Ella let the music do the work. She didn't reach for the spotlight followed her. And in that glow, she reshaped jazz, pop, and the very idea of what vocal mastery could sound like. With Ella, perfection was never cold or mechanical. It bloomed, natural, exact, and unforgettable. Jo Stafford, the voice in perfect balance. Jo Stafford never reached for your attention. She didn't have to. Her voice met the note, every note, squarely, cleanly, without tension or artifice. She sang with the kind of technical mastery that made complexity seem simple and emotion feel inevitable. No theatrics, no excess. Just sound pure and balanced, like water settling perfectly into its shape. Born in California and trained in classical voice, Stafford began her career as part of the Pied Pipers vocal group during the swing era. But it was her solo work that revealed the full clarity of her gift. She brought something rare to popular music, precision without coldness, discipline without distance. Every phrase was carefully shaped, yet still managed to feel effortless. Her voice was calm, but not dull. It carried the quiet conviction of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Listen to You Belong to Me, and you'll hear it. Not longing played up for drama, but longing rendered honest, plain, and deeply human. It's a song that could have been oversung 1,000 ways. She didn't. She trusted the melody. And in that trust, she revealed its full weight. Stafford was often called the singer's singer, admired by vocalists across genres for her flawless intonation and phrasing. But she wasn't content to be a technician. She had humor, warmth, and even a subversive streak, occasionally recording under parody alter egos just to remind the industry she wasn't taking herself too seriously. Still, when she stepped behind the microphone as herself, there was nothing ironic or uncertain. She brought elegance and intelligence to every performance, setting a standard that few have ever matched. Jo Stafford's voice didn't soar. It settled, and in that stillness, it became unforgettable. Perry Como, effortless stillness. Perry Como didn't perform. He relaxed. Where others climbed into a song, he strolled. There was no strain, no urgency, no need to impress, and that's exactly what made his voice so compelling. He sang like someone who was completely at ease with the silence and entirely in control of what broke it. Born Pierino Ronald Como in Pennsylvania, the son of Italian immigrants, he started as a barber. That sense of quiet craftsmanship never left him. He didn't explode onto the scene. He glided in. His voice was a baritone of near-liquid smoothness, unforced, steady, clean. He never seemed to push. Notes just landed. At a time when post-war America was swelling with ambition and energy, Como offered the opposite, calm. Songs like Catch a Falling Star or Magic Moments didn't shout to be heard. They settled into your memory like an easy chair you didn't realize you missed until you sat down. There was sincerity in his phrasing, a natural rhythm to his delivery that made even the most sentimental lyrics feel grounded. He became one of the most popular vocalists of his time without ever appearing to chase popularity. On television, he was affable, modest, famously laid back, and that same presence lived in his music. It was as if he trusted the melody and the listener enough not to interfere. Perry Como didn't need to reinvent anything. He found what worked: warmth, clarity, restraint, and mastered it. In his best performances, you don't feel like you're hearing a voice. You feel like you're hearing peace given shape. Not every legacy is built on force. Some are built on grace. Perry Como made stillness sing. Sarah Vaughan velvet and voltage. Sarah Vaughan didn't sing songs, she rewrote their physics. Her voice was a contradiction in motion, cool as dusk, yet capable of igniting from a whisper into something explosive. There was warmth, there was weight, but always at the core, a kind of quiet volatility. You never knew quite where she was about to take you, only that you wanted to follow. Born in Newark, New Jersey, Vaughan started young, absorbing classical technique in church choirs and then stepping directly into the hard grind of the jazz world. She won an amateur contest at the Apollo Theater, like so many greats, but what came next was different. She didn't rise through charm or image. She rose because no one had ever heard anything quite like her. Her tone was unmistakable, rich, dark, and slightly elusive, like trying to describe the color of smoke. She could glide through a melody with the grace of a string section, then suddenly descend into a near-operatic vibrato that seemed to shake the walls. Unlike her contemporaries, who leaned into clarity and clean phrasing, Vaughan bent notes like glass, warping melodies into something newly alive. And when she scat, it wasn't playful or cute, it was calculated, electric, masterful. Critics called her the Divine One, and the name fit, not because she was untouchable, but because there was something otherworldly in the way she controlled a line. She had the technical range of a conservatory soprano and the soul of a jazz improviser. Very few singers ever possessed both. With Sarah Vaughan, the thrill was never just in the beauty. It was in the power, the sheer sense that something enormous was always humming beneath the surface, waiting to rise. Lena Horne, steel wrapped in silk. Lena Horne didn't just sing, she carried herself through a song. Every note, every glance, every pause was deliberate, controlled, poised. She brought an elegance to the stage that felt effortless, but never passive. Beneath the smooth phrasing and graceful delivery was something far stronger, conviction. Born in Brooklyn in 1917, Lena Horne began performing as a teenager, navigating the club circuits and orchestras of the 1930s and 40s with a focus and drive that separated her immediately from the crowd. Her voice had a certain clarity, smooth, yes, but with a quiet sharpness, like glass polish to a sheen. She didn't overpower a song. She sculpted it. She found early fame in Hollywood, becoming one of the first black performers signed to a long-term studio contract. But while the screen gave her visibility, it often reduced her. The music gave her something else, freedom. It was in her recordings and live performances that Horne truly came alive, revealing a voice that balanced restraint and emotion with surgical precision. Listen to her rendition of Stormy Weather, a song so deeply associated with her, it almost feels biographical. She doesn't wail or weep. She measures. The heartbreak isn't a performance, it's a portrait. And in her interpretation, pain becomes elegance, sorrow becomes power. Throughout her career, Lena Horne demanded control of her image, her repertoire, her voice, in every sense of the word. Her songs weren't just melodies, they were statements of identity, rendered with dignity and poise. She sang with the elegance of a leading lady and the strength of someone who had to earn that spotlight every night. Steel wrapped in silk. A voice that shimmered, yes, but one that stood. Tony Bennett, Romance with a Pulse. Tony Bennett sang like he remembered every love he'd ever had and forgave them all. There was something unmistakably human in his voice, warmth without sentimentality, polish without distance, drama without excess. He didn't invent the American songbook, but he gave it a heartbeat. Born Anthony Dominic Benedetto in Queens, New York, he brought a sense of old-world romanticism into post-war America, but with a contemporary edge. His voice was golden, strong but flexible, capable of soaring through ballads and bouncing through up-tempo jazz with the same natural ease. There was no gimmick in his delivery. Just feeling, phrased with absolute clarity. "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" became his calling card, but it was far from his only triumph. The real magic of Bennett wasn't in a single song, it was in his longevity. His ability to evolve, to stay relevant without chasing trends. Decade after decade, he returned to the core: melody, lyric, emotion. He believed in the structure of a good song, and he honored it with every breath. There was a time when the world rushed past this kind of singing, elegant, romantic, unironic. And yet, Tony never changed his direction. He didn't need to. Eventually, the world circled back to him. Even in his later years, performing with younger artists and reaching new generations, he never adjusted his voice to fit a moment. He let the moment meet him. In an industry that often favors reinvention, Tony Bennett reminded us that refinement is its own kind of rebellion. He made romance feel noble, not naive. And his voice, strong, steady, timeless, still sounds like a memory you didn't know you missed. Dinah Washington, clarity with a bite. Dinah Washington didn't blur edges. She carved them. Every word she sang was pronounced like it mattered, because to her it did. In an era when many voices swayed and smoothed their way through jazz and blues, hers cut straight through. Not cold, not harsh, just unmistakably clear. Born Ruth Lee Jones in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and raised in Chicago, she came up through the gospel circuit before stepping into the smoky, fast-moving world of jazz clubs and late-night recordings. And once she arrived, there was no confusing her with anyone else. Her tone was unmistakable, bright, assertive, full of personality. She could shift from flirtatious to furious in a single measure, but always with control, always with precision. Washington didn't just sing songs, she delivered them, like someone handing you a letter she read 3 times and underlined. What a Difference a Day Makes became her signature hit not because it was flashy, but because it was so perfectly, elegantly stated. She didn't rush. She didn't oversell. She just told the truth, melodically, rhythmically, and with style to burn. She crossed genres effortlessly, moving from jazz to blues to pop without ever losing her identity. And she recorded prolifically, dozens of albums, hundreds of songs, each stamped with her crisp diction and emotional bite. Even when the arrangements swelled, her voice remained the focus. She didn't get lost in the music. The music arranged itself around her. Some singers ask you to feel. Dinah Washington told you what she felt and dared you to catch up. She didn't round off the edges of emotion. She sharpened them, cleaned them, made them shine. She was the truth, delivered in perfect pitch. Deanna Durbin, Crystal in a World of Smoke. Deanna Durbin sang, as if the world were still quiet enough to listen. Her voice didn't growl or bend or scatter, it soared. Clear, bell-like, classically trained yet remarkably accessible, she brought operatic precision into mainstream cinema without ever seeming out of place. In a world filling with brass, rhythm, and edge, she was clarity, untouched, unshaken. Born Edna Mae Durbin in Winnipeg, Canada, and raised in Southern California, she was a prodigy in every sense. Signed to Universal Pictures as a teenager, she rose to fame not in spite of her classical style, but because of it. Her films in the 1930s and 40s were built around her singing, and her voice was the center of gravity. It wasn't just beautiful, it was flawless. While most stars were being coached to sing with charm or personality, Durbin sang with discipline. But somehow, she never sounded cold. Whether performing a Schubert Lied or a sentimental ballad, she retained a kind of emotional directness that connected instantly. Her voice felt like sunlight in a darkened theater, warm, illuminating, unforced. She didn't seek the wild highs of fame for long. At the height of her career, she stepped away from the screen entirely, retreating into private life. But in her short time in the spotlight, she left an impression that never quite faded. Her voice became something of a preserved artifact, untouched by time, preserved in the grooves of early recordings and the frames of black and white film. In an era of style, Deanna Durbin offered substance. Her gift wasn't just her voice, it was the way she held it, protected it, and shared it with a kind of grace that now feels almost impossible. 12 voices, each a different shape, each unforgettable. Billie Holiday, Smoke in the Spotlight. Billie Holiday never had a perfect voice. What she had was something rarer, truth. Her sound wasn't built for polish or precision. It was built for memory. Listening to her is like stepping into a room you forgot you loved, dimly lit, dust in the air, something unresolved hanging just out of reach. You don't always know what she's trying to tell you, but you feel it. That's what mattered. Born Eleanora Fagan in Philadelphia and raised in Baltimore, Holiday's story, like her voice, was far from smooth. But her struggles didn't just inform her music, they fused with it. She sang like someone who had already lived the story twice and wasn't sure it would end the same way again. The notes she chose to bend, the silences she left behind, they told you everything. She didn't hit a lyric straight on. She leaned into it, slid around it, rephrased it like it was a conversation happening in real time. In her hands, a standard like, "I'll be seeing you," stopped being a song and became a confession. And then there was Strange Fruit, a performance that didn't ask for approval, didn't care for applause. It stood in the silence and dared you to look away. Holiday wasn't a stylist. She was a narrator, dragging jazz out of the parlor rooms and into the shadows where the real stories lived. She didn't shine in the traditional sense. She glowed low and constant, like the end of a cigarette in the dark, warm, haunted, impossible to ignore. With Billie, every song came at a cost, and that's what made it beautiful. As the final note fades, we're left with more than just melodies, we're left with memory. These 12 voices weren't just part of old Hollywood. They were its soul. In smoky clubs, recording studios, and grand theaters, they shaped the emotional language of a century. They sang about love, loss, joy, and longing, and somehow made it feel personal to each of us. Their legacies are not frozen in time. They live on every time we press play, hum a forgotten tune, or find ourselves moved by a line we didn't expect. In honoring them, we don't just remember history, we keep it alive. Thank you for taking this journey with us. Thank you for pausing in the rush of the present to listen to the voices of the past. It means something not just to us, but to the memory of those who gave so much of themselves to the music. If you found yourself inspired, surprised, or simply stirred by the beauty of these timeless artists, we invite you to join our community. Like this video to show your support. Leave a comment to share your favorite artist, memory, or moment. And subscribe so you don't miss more stories, more voices, more echoes of a world worth remembering. Because here, we don't just listen to music. We keep the music alive.